Good morning, and welcome to today's webcast, Cybersecurity Threats for Energy Companies. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief video.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us. We're pleased to present another in our ongoing series of continuing professional education webcasts to help companies and individuals conquer challenges as they plan for what's next. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget to the right of the slide view. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window below the slide view and clicking submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. Today's session will offer you 1 CPE credit. To receive credit, you must meet the requirements as specified by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. You must attend at least 50 minutes of the session and respond to at least 75% of the polling questions, which we'll ask throughout today's presentation. To respond to a poll, click the button next to your answer. We'll track your progress and alert you when you've earned CPE credit. You can then click the certificate icon in the CPE Progress widget to open a PDF file that you can save to your computer. Don't worry if you can't download your PDF certificate today. We'll email a copy to you in 2 weeks. If you're attending this webcast in a group, you must complete our attendance sheet to receive CPE credit. The attendance sheet is available in the slide deck and handouts widget. Please have all group members sign it and send only 1 sheet per group. Also note that CPE credit can be awarded only to participants registered as themselves and isn't available to participants who view the on-demand version. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see isn't legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
And now I would like to introduce today's presenter, Kevin Villanueva. Kevin is a partner at Moss Adams and has been in the information technology field since 1997. He leads the firm's IT infrastructure and security practice. Kevin?
Thank you, Amy, and thanks everyone for joining the webcast. So the energy industry has gotten a lot of media attention in recent years as being a big target for cyber criminals. And so given that it's been characterized as a critical infrastructure industry, several nation-state adversaries and cyber terrorists have energy companies clearly in their sights to disrupt the flow of power to our businesses and our homes or cause a more disastrous economic fallout. So in this webcast, we'll cover some of those cyber threats that energy companies face today as they look to increase the integration of traditional IT into the operational technology environment that run our generation, transmission, and distribution systems and facilities. We'll go at a pretty good pace, and hopefully we'll have time at the end for any questions. So our agenda for today, we'll cover the current state of cybersecurity in the energy industry. I'll read off some stats that I got from various sources. We'll then go into the various cyber threats and their motives. Next, we'll shift to talk about the dichotomy between traditional IT and operating technology environments and kind of the challenges that presents from a cybersecurity perspective. And then we'll next talk about some of the common cyber attack methods used by cyber criminals. And then lastly, we'll go over some of the steps to take to minimize the risk of one of those methods being successful, and then discuss some best practice resources that are readily available to you. And then hopefully, again, at the end, we'll have time for some questions. So by the end of this webcast, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of how the digitization of the operating technology environment is making energy companies attractive targets to cyber criminals. Hopefully you'll know how systems in the IT space, IT environment can introduce cyber risk to the operating technology environment. Hopefully you'll be able to recognize the methods cyber criminals use to gain access to networks and systems. And then hopefully it'll increase your awareness of the tasks that can be undertaken to bolster overall cybersecurity posture and address these common threats. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Amy, to give our first polling question.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So our first polling question is, what sector of the energy industry are you part of? And your options are A, oil and gas, B, power and utilities, C, renewable energy, and D, other. And I will give you a few moments to respond. To participate, please click the button next to the answer you choose and hit submit. And it looks like we have a few more coming in. Okay, Kevin, here are the results.
Okay, great. It looks like we got a decent spread with most everybody coming from the oil and gas sector. So that's kind of what I expected for this webcast, but I'm glad we have representatives from the other sectors as well. All right, so let's see what the state of cybersecurity is in the energy industry today. So I got some of these stats from various different sources that I researched, and one of the things I found astounding was that distributed denial of service attacks, or DDoS attacks, are on the upswing. So according to this NetScout Cyber Threat Horizon Tracker, which tracks cyber threats in real time, there were roughly 1,780 DDoS attacks against utilities worldwide between June 15th and August 21st of this year. So within, roughly a little bit more than 2 months, there were over 1,700 attempts to really shut down these utilities worldwide. And this represents a 595% year-over-year increase from the same period last year. So that's quite astonishing. 56% of the more than 1,700 worldwide utilities surveyed for this 2019 joint report from Siemens and the Ponemon Institute about cyber threats facing utilities today said they had experienced at least one unexpected shutdown or operational data loss in 2019. These included operators of gas, solar, wind assets, and water utilities. So that's pretty astonishing as well, given that over half of them experienced some type of unexpected shutdown due to a cyber event. In the same report, less than 33% felt highly prepared to contain a breach. And that's a little bit alarming, especially amongst these smaller utilities or rural utilities who express deep concern about the ability to recover after a breach given their limited resources. This figure at the left, $17.84 million is the average annual cost cyber attacks per utility company. That's real money. And if you think about the cost to bolster OT and IT networks, some of the legal costs that may be involved in ensuing lawsuits, and breach notification costs, all of those seem to be pretty. All of them pretty much add up to this huge amount, almost $18 million. That I found that pretty astonishing as well. A small utility that was attacked last year, Rochester Public Utilities in Minnesota. They were a victim of this look-back cyber attack that hit several utilities in 2019. In those attacks, attackers used phishing attacks where a cyber criminal sends an unsuspecting employee a fake email requesting sensitive information like login credentials, for example. And this attack involved malware being triggered to infect systems and disrupt operations. RPU was one of several small utilities, roughly 13 utilities in Michigan, North Dakota, and Washington State that experienced these cyber attacks in 2019, and East Asia-based attackers were suspected. However, as far as the impact to RPU, I didn't seem to find any information about the actual impact of that attack, whether or not they shut down operations. So, but it was astonishing that 13 utilities were targeted last year by cyber criminals. Perhaps the most notorious attack on a power utility was the attack on Ukraine's power grid in 2015. And this happened during the afternoon of December 23rd, when attackers took over computers in the utility's control center and wiped the files from operator workstations, resulting in 30 substations taken offline, and in total, 3 power distribution centers. This impacted roughly 230,000 residents who were impacted with no power for up to 6 hours. The highly sophisticated nature of this attack proved it was not an opportunistic attack, as a lot of cyber criminals are opportunistic when they devise their attacks or breach attempts. And it took significant amount of time and a high degree of skill to plan and carry out. So it was suspected by Ukraine's intelligence community that Russia was working with cyber criminals to launch the attack. However, it was not confirmed. And what's interesting about the way the attackers obtained access was the origins of the attack stemmed from a spear phishing campaign during the spring of 2015 that targeted IT staff and system administrators working for these several power distribution companies in the Ukraine. The spear phishing email had a word attachment that was triggered a macro which launched a piece of malware called Black Energy 3. This Black Energy 3 malware created a backdoor for the hackers, and with this backdoor in place, the attackers appeared to have access for months prior to initiating the attack. And when they finally did, they even launched a telephone denial of service attack consisting of thousands of fake calls to the power companies so customers would have a hard time getting through to customer service. So it definitely had some ripple effects there, and thankfully it was only systems were down for roughly 6 hours, but it just kind of showed what can actually happen from one of these cyber attacks. The city of Kiev actually experienced a similar type of blackout a year later on December 16th in 2016 that lasted over an hour. This actually resulted in the loss of a fifth of Kiev's power consumption during the time. And then the Ukrainian cybersecurity firm investigating the incident said the attack was related to the December 15 attack, given the similarity of them. And then again, Ukraine's intelligence officials have claimed that the level of sophistication and coordination of the attack point to the Russian government as the perpetrator. Again, not confirmed. So what's scary about this and is that several other cybersecurity professionals were classifying the attack as a trial run for a much more widespread attack on foreign adversaries. So very concerning to say the least. I want to go over kind of, these cyber threats and who are the attackers. So, with nation-state attacks, this is probably the most serious threat actor. Just like those Ukrainian examples I mentioned, there are a number of foreign adversaries with the capabilities to cause harm to the U.S. And in fact, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security issued an alert in January of this year about foreign adversaries attacking critical infrastructure entities to disrupt services like electrical power and natural gas companies. Cyber terrorists, really they're really looking to undermine the economic value of a country. They want to create a global impact with their actions. An example of this is back in I think it was back in 2017 when a hacking group known as Xenotime used the Triton malware, which targeted safety instrumental systems. They were behind these intrusions targeting oil and gas companies in Saudi Arabia in 2017. And they were able to gain remote access to safety instrumented systems, a safety instrumented system workstation, and was able to put these SIS controllers into fail-safe state, causing an automatic shutdown of all these industrial processes. And so now they're known for targeting the industrial control systems, or ICS, networks of power grids in the U.S. and the Asia-Pacific region. So pretty scary stuff. An activist or a hacktivist, I think maybe we've all heard about the hacking group Anonymous. They're known for carrying out hacking attacks and breach attempts based on social causes. So they most recently attacked the websites of the cities of Minneapolis and Atlanta in response to the social unrest as a result of the death of George Floyd over the summer. A malicious insider, so that could be essentially a disgruntled employee. It could be someone from your IT or OT teams. It could be someone in another department that has some beef or some issue with the company. So they're insider individuals who are intending to do harm or cause a fraudulent situation or really hurt the reputation of the company. An inadvertent insider, it's just really a user that is might be ignorant of cyber threats. Maybe they caused a mistake in which resulted in an opening in the cyber defenses. This inadvertent insider threat is actually a top 3 threat facing companies today, because it's often an employee that makes a mistake to introduce malware into the IT or OT environments. They might click on that link in a phishing email that triggers a malware attack or a ransomware infection. So it's really based on human error and coupled with even misconfiguration of some systems. A hacker, this is an individual whose prime motivation is street credibility with his fellow hackers. They're going to be the ones to brag about their exploits in the various hacker forums on the dark web and surface web. So these guys are really looking at being able to brag about their conquests when they conduct a big hack and are successful. You're a cyber criminal, which is pretty common today. They're clearly out for financial gain. Their primary motive is money. So they'll use various techniques to extort money from you, including infecting machines with ransomware, stealing sensitive data for blackmail purposes, and even using phishing or voice-based impersonation attacks to trick a victim into providing sensitive data. Even today, for any would-be cyber criminal, there's crimeware as a service available on the dark web. So just as we're able to implement a software as a service cloud-based solution like that as a ERP solution or our main application in our business for running our business, a cyber criminal is able to use crimeware as a service now that's available. If they want to trigger a ransomware attack against an unsuspecting victim. And then lastly, I just want to make a point that if you think the federal government is proactively defending against these threats, you have a false sense of security, because really the onus is on the individual companies to ensure that their operations are protected against these threats. So this table, cyber threats, what could happen? So this table is put together by McKinsey & Company to show examples of potential threats and their causes that could impact the power supply chain. So as you see, the various components: generation, transmission, distribution, and then our corporate network. While I won't go over each one of these just for the sake of time, I want to point out that the many players along the way in the supply chain that add to the complexity in securing systems in the OT and IT environments. Obviously, there are more avenues for attack that may contribute to production shutdowns, which can result in lost revenue, regulatory fines, impacts to operator safety, equipment damage, and then even reputational damage in the marketplace, to name a few. Maybe one thing I will mention is that contributing to the challenge of securing utility environments in the potential cause for threats to power generation is that many of these OT systems run legacy technology that may be serviced by a limited number of providers, a limited number of vendors who may not have prioritized security over functionality. But it's the high cost to upgrade OT systems and components with equipment today that may be better designed with more robust security measures that's a real challenge. And that high cost is really hard to justify to stakeholders because there's no incremental benefit to customers. And if you think about it, it doesn't add to the customer experience. You just want to be able to have reliable power when they flip on a light switch. So as far as spending on cybersecurity measures, it's really kind of low on the priority scale for a lot of companies. So what's driving the attacks on the energy companies, especially in this opportunistic time in the era of COVID-19, when fewer on-site personnel equates to fewer people who can respond to an attack in a timely manner? So we really have to understand, different types of things that are in the mind of a cyber criminal. And number one is, utilities and power companies. They're an attractive target that is vulnerable to cyber attacks. Energy companies typically consist of geographically distributed infrastructure across many sites, which make it really kind of challenging to keep an eye on everything, maintain visibility across these various IT and OT system logs and facility camera feeds. So, as a result, it's really a large surface area to keep track of and secure. The complexity of IT and OT environments results in a large attack surface. So there's more processes that are leveraging computing technologies, including cloud-based service providers, like I mentioned earlier, for things like crunching big data. The industry is grappling with how to take advantage of advances in computing technology while ensuring high availability, safety, and reliability of the OT side within the technology function. There's the use of older legacy systems like Windows XP, embedded Windows XP, and other Windows Server technologies that are still pervasive in the industry but are obsolete and no longer supported by Microsoft. The digital transformation is slowly but surely modernizing these legacy systems and equipment that currently are more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Operational technology systems require not only IT engineering expertise, not only IT but engineering expertise in order to manage and maintain. So to be able to effectively administer and manage systems in both the IT and OT environments, that's a really tall order. The technologies are very different, often non-standard, and often from various vendors that are not interoperable with each other. There's a talent shortage. OT and IT skills are very hard to come by. IT expertise alone is hard enough to find in today's job market, but add the need to have OT skills in the same job candidate, and you might be looking for a golden unicorn out there. A successful attack can lead to disastrous consequences. So cyber criminals know that attacking a utility can cause widespread blackouts, disruption to operations, equipment damage, even result in erroneous data being shared, and ultimately production stoppage. So they're seeing this as a big kill on their belt. Sorry. There's also potential for significant financial gain. Cyber criminals are betting that a utility company CEO will make the decision to pay the ransom in a ransomware attack rather than risk an extended system outage and cause a bigger stir. So rather than paying the ransom, rather than risking with not paying the ransom and having to restore the environment from backup media, they'll often just pay the ransom just to kind of keep it under wraps and not make a big deal about it and resume normal operations. And unfortunately, that has its own risks. So IT versus OT. So with this slide, I just wanted to show the distinction in key characteristics between traditional IT and OT environments that add to that cybersecurity challenge. And if you look at this list, you're going to see that there's often different goals listed here. So whereas with traditional IT, the goal there is really protecting computing assets and data. For operational technology, the goal is really to protect the physical environment. One of the key objectives is maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability within IT environments. But for OT environments, safety, reliability, and stability are really the critical factors. Again, and then you have like constantly changing technologies within IT environments, whereas OT environments has that aging infrastructure, those legacy systems and non-standard equipment. So these really contribute to the complexity and the challenge of securing these environments, securing utilities and power companies, and making sure that they're protected against cyber attacks. And while it's typical for organizational separation between IT and OT staff, where operators and administrators of the OT networks and systems do not fall under the traditional corporate IT environments, this is changing. We're kind of seeing this changing. Whereas traditionally they were part of operations and they had different objectives and practices for maintaining the systems that run the SCADA and the ICS networks, we're now seeing them kind of being absorbed under the IT umbrella within organizations. And then, unfortunately, though, that because of that aging infrastructure and non-standard equipment often found in these SCADA and ICS networks that make up the OT environment, the basic security mechanisms, such as requiring passwords to access these devices, have been lacking. So a lot of IT teams have been having to put in compensating controls to deal with that. So with that, I think we have our next polling question. So I'll toss it over to you, Amy.
All right, thank you. So our second polling question is, how confident are you that your company can recover timely from a cyber attack? And your options are A, very confident, B, somewhat confident, or C, not confident. And as a reminder, if you would like to receive CPE credit for today's webcast, you will need to respond to at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. And it looks like most of you have responded, so I'm going to show the results. Here you go, Kevin.
Oh, okay, great. So this is definitely encouraging. Almost 95%, almost 95% have said that they either somewhat confident or very confident. So that's really encouraging and good to see. All right, so now we'll look at some of the different cyber attack methods used by cybercriminals to attack networks and systems and get access to data or disrupt operations. So most common cyber attack methods, there's a lot of information on the slide about the different methods. I won't go through all of these, but I'll quickly explain some of the ones that are not as commonly heard of. So some of you may have heard the term cryptojacking. This is really the undetected use of a victim's computer's resources to mine cryptocurrency. And this was really popular back in 2018 when we'd hear stories about a company's servers being bogged down all the time, experiencing performance issues, and then also resulting in higher electric bills from these data centers that are running these systems. But while this was popular back in 2018, it's recently has since been supplanted by ransomware attacks. So ransomware attacks seem to have taken a year off in 2018 after a disastrous 2017 year. But then have picked up in 2019 and 2020 for sure. Ransomware, I think we might be all familiar with this. This is when a hacker infects your computer and renders the hard drive or specific files unreadable through the use of strong encryption, forcing the victim to pay that ransom, typically in cryptocurrency, in order to receive that decryption key. So again, this is seems to be kind of the modus operandi of a lot of cyber criminals, and it's really financially driven, and often large ransoms are paid as a result. Spear phishing, this is when a hacker targets specific individuals via email in order to spur an action to further the attacker's nefarious purposes, such as providing login information, gaining access to sensitive information, or triggering the wiring of money. Fileless attacks, maybe some of you may not have heard of this type of attack, but this is malware that does not get installed on a hard drive and therefore is undetectable by traditional antivirus and endpoint protection mechanisms. This is actually gaining traction as a method used by attackers because it takes advantage of traditional tools built into like the Windows operating systems that are used by system administrators and IT staff pretty regularly. So I'll go over this in a little bit. And then the last thing is IoT, or Internet of Things. I think cyber professionals like to call it Internet of Threats, just because a lot of IoT devices open big holes in corporate networks. So this is not necessarily a type of attack, but it's a technology that's increasingly becoming a target for hackers as an ingress point to networks and systems. And I'll go over these here in a few slides as well. Okay, so social engineering. So I want to go over this definition of social engineering because phishing is essentially just a type of social engineering. So it's just a variation of a social engineering-based attack. So the definition: the art of manipulating people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. And so cyber criminals will use any combination of social engineering attacks to obtain credentials to network systems, applications, and data. So some of these techniques include, again, email phishing, watering hole attacks where an attacker would infect a commonly visited website that the victim typically goes to with malware that extracts information as the individual is browsing that site. Phone-based attacks, or phishing, is where the attacker will pretend or impersonate a individual of authority in order to entice the victim to provide sensitive information. And then there's also physical site penetration via impersonation. So an attacker may impersonate a copier repair guy, for example, and try to gain physical access to the network that way in order to install a backdoor device like a Raspberry Pi or some of these other ones that are out there on the market. But social engineering, in the end, really preys on the natural inclination to trust and help others. So out of all these different techniques used in the utility and power industry, it seems like phishing appears to be the weapon of choice for a lot of these attackers and cyber criminals. This quote at the bottom: amateurs hack systems and professionals hack people. So I really like this quote. I don't know who this quote can be attributed to, but it's definitely on point with cyber attacks happening today. Really gone are the days where a cyber criminal or attacker is going to be banging on their keyboard endlessly in order to crack into a web server or an exposed system. And it's rather going through the essentially the weakest chain in the link, which is usually the human factor. And as any cybersecurity pro can attest to, humans are often that weakest link in an organization's cybersecurity posture. So let's talk about this Dragonfly phishing attack, which is one notable phishing attack against the energy industry that occurred back in 2015 when a group called Dragonfly targeted organizations in the U.S., Turkey, and Switzerland using a variety of techniques to acquire network and system credentials. So the techniques that these guys use are email phishing, the watering hole attacks, and then eventually triggering a malware infection to install Trojan malware, or essentially this provides a backdoor remote access entry into the victim organization's network. So in 2015, this group targeted employees of an energy company by sending emails disguised as an invitation to a New Year's Eve party. So I don't know what kind of information this invitation had in terms of advertising this New Year's Eve party. Maybe they're offering like open bar all night or something. But this actually got enough of the employees to respond to this invitation and click on the attachment that was in the invitation. And this attachment would, again, install malware, malicious software onto the victim's workstations. And this malware would essentially contact back the attacker's command and control server that was operated by Dragonfly to essentially sift information over time. And some of that information, again, is login credentials to the network. So very, very scary stuff. And I couldn't find what the contents of that invitation was, but I'd be curious to really know as far as like what triggered there or what enticed their thinking and clicking on it and responding to it. So how do you defend against phishing attacks? Well, there's a number of technical as well as some administrative controls that should be in place for any organization wanting to thwart any type of phishing attack. So on the technical side, some of this is really, cybersecurity 101. Number one being implement antivirus and spam filtering on mail servers. These are technical controls that would help, stop a illegitimate email from coming even through and hitting a victim's mailbox, a would-be victim's mailbox. And so having those controls in place does slow down those attempts. Enable anti-spoofing controls to make sure the email is coming from a validated and real email source address. A lot of modern email systems today do have this capability. So if it's not enabled, then obviously your IT group is doing something wrong. Use antivirus or endpoint protection software on your workstations and servers to ensure that they're updated constantly so that they can help identify and stop the latest type of virus infections from occurring. So, a lot of the viruses that are out there, they're signature-based, and antivirus or endpoint protection software will recognize those signatures, and once they do, they'll just stop them in their tracks from even infecting the machine entirely. So There's also patching workstations so malware doesn't spread. Virus and other malware often take advantage of vulnerabilities in operating systems and application software to propagate and spread. And having that consistent or regular patch management strategy will help prevent many infections from occurring. Register all company domains that are slightly different from the actual company domain. And this is actually a really good practice because, like, for example, different variations of the @mossadams.com domain may include replacing the S's with $ signs and the O's with zeros. So registering these variations and owning them will help prevent attackers from abusing them. Some of the administrative controls is having a robust security awareness training program in place for your end users. This will help them recognize phishing email, help them remind them not to click on embedded links, especially in emails from sources they don't know, and don't open those email attachments from unknown senders. And then along with the security awareness training is testing users periodically through regular phishing tests. So there's outfits out there that will, that you can work with that will help create and craft specific emails to your industry that is likely to be received by those in your industry. And essentially, test your end users, test your employees, and see if they are susceptible to this type of attack. Like maybe some of them will click on the link that gets diverted to a false web page that asks for login credentials. See how many employees actually enter their login credentials. That's going to be one of the best defenses against phishing attacks, is just having your employees get used to recognizing and being tested on their susceptibility to these types of attacks. Ensure solid internal controls in place for key processes that might require authorization. An example of this is vendor payments. So essentially, if an invoice comes in and it looks kind of fishy, or the amount to be paid is out of the ordinary, certainly have two people actually validate that is indeed a true invoice coming from a legitimate source, and you may even have controls around validating that with the vendor themselves. So having good internal controls, that's also going to be around key process, that's also going to be a good defense against phishing attacks, especially when a lot of these phishing attacks ask for money or sensitive information like that. Well, let's talk about Fileless attacks. Some of you may not have heard of Fileless attacks, but it is gaining some popularity. Fileless attacks is essentially malware that stays resident in a system's memory. Basically a system's RAM memory, for those of you that understand what RAM is. And as such, because it resides in memory, it's not a program or a piece of software that is installed on a machine's hard drive that can be detected by modern antivirus software. So there is no signature for antivirus software to detect once it's installed on a machine's hard drive. And so as a result, it's not as visible as traditional computer viruses, and that makes it very difficult to detect. And once it's installed, it utilizes these tools that an IT administrator would use to manage the system. So these tools are things like PowerShell or WMI. Again, these are common to Windows-based environments. So, and what happens is when an IT shop starts looking or investigating system logs during a breach attempt, as they look through these logs and see the use of these different tools like PowerShell or WMI, they just look like normal activity. So it's nothing to be suspicious about. And as a result, it's very hard to detect just from looking at system logs. And it's becoming more common and emerging as one of the more dangerous threats, cyber threats to businesses, and especially small to medium-sized businesses that may not have resources available to defend against this threat. These stats down below are taken from a Ponemon Institute and from a study done in 2017, or actually 2018. And this is pretty interesting because 42% of the companies surveyed reported they experienced at least one Fileless malware attack back in 2017. And roughly 30% of all the attacks experienced were Fileless attacks. And that number is expected to grow. The ones that were successful, of those ones that were successful, 77% of them use this Fileless attack method. And so it's just something to be aware of as far as the technique used by cyber criminals. And actually, I'll actually, this next slide, I'll talk about how it actually works. So how this works is a user actually receives a spam message or a phishing email with an embedded link to a malicious web page. That user will click on this link. Once they click on this link, they get diverted to a website that has been infected by the attacker. That website essentially installs, it actually triggers the PowerShell software running on a Windows machine. And this PowerShell script that gets run executes instructions to essentially hide their tracks and operate their activity in the system's memory. And this PowerShell script will download and execute from a command and control server operated by the attacker. And as a result, essentially a channel is created where that script essentially enables the user's data get kind of siphoned back to this command and control server that the attacker controls. So essentially it runs in the background while the user is doing regular things, logging in, entering data, and that type of data is often like siphoned as a result of this script running. And so again, because it runs in memory, it's very difficult to detect. And unfortunately, there's definitely some challenges that IT staff have in identifying this type of attack. But there are things that you can do to defend against it, and some of these are kind of difficult to implement. So, for example, disabling unused Windows services like PowerShell and WMI. Not everybody needs the use of PowerShell. This is really typically limited to your system administrators or IT administrators. And when you do need to use PowerShell on those systems that do use it, establish a baseline of typical performance on these systems to be familiar with the behavior of these built-in tools. So, if you see a PowerShell script running as a service, of course, that's really something to be suspicious about, because that's not typical. And so your IT staff should be able to recognize that and be on the lookout for that. Keeping the systems up to date with system patches. Again, this is kind of like Cybersecurity 101. The more up to date your software is, especially your operating system software, the less of a chance that it's going to get compromised. Disable Office macros. So again, this is really difficult to do, especially if you need it to do your job is running those macros. But if you're in a position, or if you have employees that are in positions where they do not need to use Office macros, no need to enable them for Office applications. Educate your users through regular security awareness training. I think I mentioned this before. They're going to be your first line of defense in recognizing attacks. So really educate your end users on what to look out for and the cyber threats that are out there. And then segment your network to help deter or prevent the spread of these malicious programs that may inject Fileless malware into memory. So, as we've seen in some of the prior examples I mentioned, a lot of these malicious software programs out there, malware, they will propagate through your network and try to infect as many machines as possible. And having your network segmented to smaller chunks will help prevent that spread of these malicious programs and cause like one layer of defense against these malicious software attempts. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Amy, for our third polling question.
Okay, our third polling question is, what is an example of a social engineering attack? And your options are A, phishing, B, impersonation, C, spear phishing, or D, all of the above. And for those of you that would like a copy of today's slides, you can download them from the folder that says Slide Deck and Handouts to the right of the slide view. And we'll give everyone a minute to respond here. Okay, Kevin, here are the results.
Awesome. This is what I expected. This is a softball question. I'm glad 73% of you answered all of the above, because all of these, phishing, impersonation, spear phishing, those are all examples of social engineering attacks. So thank you. Okay, so let's talk about the Internet of Things, or again, as cyber pros call it, the Internet of Threats. Most people don't think of these IoT devices as computers. And just as a simple definition, IoT devices can be thought of any smart computing device. So you think about some of these examples like, remote sensors used for monitoring equipment, especially in your OT environments. That smart video conferencing system that you have in your conference rooms, RFID inventory systems that can sense what's on a pallet as it rolls through a warehouse, your home router, these vending machines that will automatically call home if they're low on inventory, baby monitors, your iRobot HVAC monitoring systems, and then monitoring systems that monitor your data centers. Medical devices. These are clearly examples of IoT devices, and a lot of these we see just even in our consumer lives. So IoT devices, they often come with a stripped-down version of the Linux operating system, and they're usually using wireless networks to connect and talk to each other. So that, again, these IoT devices in your operations, they might consist of these various sensors that collect data from the assets involved in the generation process to automatically report on things like, wear, vibration, temperature, resulting in real-time alerts, analytics, and visibility. And they're really supposed to really enhance the operations of, utilities and power companies to improve, safety, improve these real-time analysis, really enhance and gain efficiencies in just the whole process. So you might have a lot of these in your environment and don't even know it. Now, the challenge with these IoT devices, they only have enough processing power to do what they're designed to do and nothing more. So consequently, they don't have the power to run, protections like antivirus software or other technical security measures. So, for example, you guys might have a Ring video doorbell system that Ring system does not have the power or functionality to protect itself against an attack specifically on that device because it's just not as robust and it doesn't have the security measures built in. I better this stat right here, 22 billion. That's the number of IoT devices that are active, are expected to be active, and expected to grow to 10 billion in 2020 and to 22 billion by 2025. That was from IoT Analytics, and that was from an August 2018 report. I didn't check what the most recent count is now, but I'm sure it's that 22 billion has probably jumped up to probably 30 billion by 2025, if not more, given the ubiquity of these devices. All right, so let's see. So I want to talk about bots and how they work with IoT devices. So bots are computer programs that automate a process for the user. That's boiled down, and in essence, that's what bots are. They're computer programs that automate a process for the user. A botnet is an army of computers under the remote control of an individual, an attacker, or a cyber criminal. In essence, they act like a supercomputer for criminal purposes, and they're often used in distributed denial of service attacks or DDoS attacks. A good bot example, though, is like a search engine spider that scours the web and indexes new web pages for a search engine, or a software program that goes out and looks for the best deal on airline flights or a hotel room. Now, botnets, in conjunction with IoT devices, makes a very powerful weapon for any cyber criminal. And to use an example, we can look back to what happened in 2016, September of 2016, when there was a botnet attack against the Dyn Internet Infrastructure Company. So back in September 2016, there was a distributed denial of service attack on the internet, on the East Coast, primarily in the U.S. East Coast. And it was the work of the Mirai botnet. And what the Mirai botnet did, it really, what it did was it tried scanning big blocks of IP addresses and IoT devices on the internet for open telnet ports. And then it essentially did a brute force password attack against those devices using 61 known default passwords for different devices. And basically what happened is, as this attack was occurring and these different devices were getting commandeered, I mean, these were devices like baby monitors, remote baby monitors, DVR equipment, other types of IoT devices found in the home. Basically, I think it was like 16,000 of these devices got commandeered by the attacker. And it aimed internet traffic at Dyn, which was an internet infrastructure service company that provided domain name services to a lot of big websites like Netflix, Reddit, CNN, amongst others. And this army of botnets essentially brought down that portion of the internet for, I can't remember how much time. I think it was like over like 3 hours or so. But for an e-commerce company, think about the impact that could have on just sales during that 3-hour time. And so a lot of these criminals would leverage these botnets in order to do nefarious things, mostly doing denial of service based attacks. So really to defend against botnet attacks, this is also somewhat of a challenge. Number one is to change the default passwords on IoT devices. So if you do have something like a sensor or actuator that may have software and it comes with a default password like a lot of them do, make sure you change that to something strong and not guessable. Harden the devices if possible. So if there's maybe firmware updates or other things, configuration changes to the devices that need to happen in order to better secure it, definitely have your IT or OT staff do that, as well as disable any unused functionality for the system. Remove protocols that are not needed, so any type of communication protocols that are not needed and could be compromised, definitely have those disabled. Ensure the firmware or operating system is updated regularly. That's often at the whim of the device manufacturer. And then also segment those IoT devices from the corporate network. So, for example, if you're running, these video conferencing systems, get them on a separate device, a separate network, so that they're isolated from the rest of the network and an attacker can't get access to those. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a lot of best practice guidance resources out there. There's the Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls, Top 20 framework. There's ISO 27001. There's a lot of guidance put out by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, for critical infrastructure companies. One of the ones we're definitely seeing widely adopted across all types of industries, and not just those deemed critical infrastructure, is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF. They really span approximately, I think it's like 120 different controls that cover these different cyber security family classifications of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And it's really designed to complement an existing organizational cybersecurity program. Some of the ones that are energy specific are the Department of Energy's Oil and Natural Gas Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model, which many of you might be familiar with, but this is really aimed at improving security in the energy sector, and it applies to both IT and OT environments. And then, of course, there's the NERC, or North American Electrical Reliability Corp, or NERC CIP or SIP, for critical infrastructure protection standards, I think, which some of you have to comply with. And then there's other ones that are industrial control system or ICS specific, listed below, especially that NIST 800-180, or excuse me, 800-82, the Guide to Industrial Control System Security. There's a lot of really good guidance there as far as what you need to know to secure your systems. With that, I'll bring it to the last polling question. So, Amy, we'll go through this one pretty quickly.
All right, so the last polling question is, my company aligns its cybersecurity program with an industry-accepted best practice framework or standard. And your options are A, true, B, false, or C, I don't know. And once you have completed all CPE requirements, you will be able to download a PDF of your certificate from the CPE progress window to the right of the slide view. All right, we have a couple more coming in here. Okay, here you
Great.
go.
All right. Well, yeah, this is encouraging. I was actually not expecting more than half. So 60% of you said that your company does align with the cybersecurity, with an industry-accepted best practice framework. So that's really good to actually see. 35% of you don't know, so maybe that's something that to ask your IT director or whoever's in charge of the technology environment there, because I'm sure they have something in mind as far as following and securing the systems and networks. All right, so last slide here is really our key takeaways. So one thing is just keep in mind attacks will continue to evolve in sophistication. Cyber criminals are continually looking for new ways to breach a system and gain access to valuable data. In fact, attacks involving artificial intelligence will increase. Back in September 2019, I think it was reported that the CEO of a UK-based energy company was actually tricked into sending the equivalent of $243,000 to a cyber criminal who used an AI-generated voice impersonation of the parent company CEO who resided in Germany to request the funds transfer. So that's a huge chunk of change, and it was done by using an artificial intelligence program to really simulate the Germany CEO's voice, along with his tone, intonation, his nuances in his voice. And really, it was successful in tricking this UK-based energy company into sending that money. Seek guidance from the various best practice resources publicly available. So I mentioned a bunch of them in the prior slides. So those two notable ones are the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and NIST 800-82, that Guide to Industrial Control System Security. Bridge the gap between IT and OT by adopting similar cybersecurity practices. So one of these things is really adopting a vulnerability management program for both. So, doing regular things like penetration testing on those systems and then patching those systems right afterwards if patches are missing. That's going to be a good practice for really securing the environment. Hold your business partners to the same standard of cybersecurity in their enterprise. So, be aware of those cyber risks from system vendors that they may introduce to your environment, especially if you provide them with persistent remote access or physical access for maintenance purposes. And then lastly, educate your workforce on those threats and risks, particularly as they relate to the energy industry. And this is really about instituting security awareness training into your risk mitigation strategy. And again, employees are always going to be your first defense against cyber attacks. So with that, we are at 10:58. Let's see, I think we have time for maybe one question. So speaking of third parties, so we have some third parties who manage aspects of our IT and OT environments. Is there anything you can recommend for gaining an understanding of their cybersecurity controls? Well, hopefully with those third parties and your agreements with them, there is a clause for being able to audit those third parties and the control structure that they may have in place, especially if they're handling sensitive data or sensitive aspects of your IT and OT environment. One of the things you might be able to get from them is what's called a SOC audit report or a SOC 2 audit report. This is an attestation report performed by a third-party accounting firm that attests to the operating effectiveness and the design of specific security controls they might have in place. So this could be covering their practices around hiring, for example. Do they do background checks? Do they train their employees on cybersecurity measures? It also covers things like, operational security, communication security. So that might be a good thing to actually obtain as you're doing your due diligence for some of these third-party vendors. that may be involved in some aspect of managing your IT environment and OT environment. So again, something to think of mind, those SOC audit reports or other third-party attestation reports. And it looks like with that, we're at the top of the hour. So Amy, back to you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And thank you for a great presentation today. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we will do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. As a reminder, if you attended today's presentation in a group and would like to receive CPE credit, you must complete the group attendance sheet found in the slide deck and handouts window. If you participated as an individual and met all certification requirements, your certificate is available to download now in the CPE progress window. I'll keep the webcast console open for a few minutes to give you time to download. A copy of your certificate will be emailed within 3 weeks should you have any difficulty downloading it now. Here is a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey as your feedback is very important to us. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us again next time.
Thanks, everybody.